Hi and welcome to the part one of the second video in the series on executive coaching. I'm Harry Petropoulos, one of the founding directors of Red Pill Performance Consultants. We're an executive coaching firm established in 2004 with offices in Sydney and in Perth. Today I'm going to begin to define executive coaching, what it is and just as importantly what it isn't. I'm also going to take a closer look at the key stakeholders in the executive coaching relationship. In part two of this second video, I'll start to narrow down the definition of executive coaching and share with you a couple of definitions that I think are quite relevant to the field. Executive coaching is one of several approaches or interventions that can be used to promote organisational and leadership development. Other forms of learning interventions include things like training, counselling, mentoring, and also consulting. Let's take a closer look at some of these. When it comes to training, in training the learning agenda is usually set by the trainer, whereas in coaching the coachee tends to set his or her own learning agenda, which is often quite fluid. Training is essential to organisational and personal development. We couldn't function as organisations without it. But at the end of the day, training isn't coaching. We shouldn't confuse it with coaching. If we look at counselling, in counselling, the counsellor typically tries to diagnose their client's psychological state and they'll try to effectively fix what's broken. That is, the counsellor will try to make the person whole again from a psychological standpoint. Over the years, I've heard of many examples of coaches who don't have any perhaps formal counselling qualifications, blurring the lines between coaching, counselling and psychotherapy with sometimes quite calamitous outcomes. By contrast, true coaching is not so interested in fixing problems of the past, although as a coach you do need to understand some of the history to get perspective. Coaching is more future focused and seeks to raise the coachee's awareness, encouraging the coachee to set goals and take responsibility for solving their own problems. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that coaching is a better intervention than, say, counselling. That's not the case. Both interventions are quite effective. It's just that the two interventions are designed to address quite different things. But I guess the key point here, though, is that as executive coaches, we need to remind ourselves, while important, counselling isn't really coaching. It's also easy to blur the lines between coaching and consulting. Now, consultants tend to be experts in their particular area of expertise versus coaches who need typically only be expert in facilitating their coachees' learning and development and goal attainment processes. Consultants tend to have privileged knowledge and are usually hired to show their clients the best way to proceed on a particular issue. Coaches, on the other hand, help their coachees find their own solutions. Now, consultants play an important role in business improvement and organisational development, but again, let's not confuse consulting with coaching. And what about mentoring? In the field, I often hear the terms coaching and mentoring used almost interchangeably. Although the two learning interventions overlap, they are quite different. Both are complex relationship-based interventions, but mentoring typically involves a transfer of knowledge and experience from a more seasoned person to a less experienced one. The key element in a mentoring relationship is domain-specific knowledge and the networks of the mentor. Coaching, on the other hand, doesn't rely on the coach having detailed domain-specific knowledge, although it does sometimes help. It doesn't rely on coaches having experience and networks for its success. While it's always helpful if the coach has an understanding of the key industry drivers of the coachee's business, the coach adds value primarily by facilitating discussions that lead to bespoke solutions. In truth, most executive coaching assignments do cross over into these other areas from time to time, and that's okay. The problem is that if you find yourself spending too much time either training, counselling, consulting or mentoring, while you may be adding value to your client, what you're actually doing is probably not coaching in the true definition of the word. Okay, so we've established that coaching is a process that's quite distinct from other learning and development interventions, such as we mentioned, for instance, training, mentoring, consulting, and counselling. But the term coaching itself is often used to describe a wide range of activities. For instance, people sometimes confuse life coaching with executive coaching. Now, life coaching tends to adopt a whole-of-life approach and as such focuses on both work and non-work related development. While I recognise that it's probably a little naive and probably unhelpful to believe that you can somehow have an absolute division between your work realm and your personal realm, executive coaching's primary focus is on work-related challenges and takes place in the context of an organisation. The term business coaching is also often confounded with executive coaching. Although they share the same coaching descriptor, once again, these two interventions are quite different. Business coaching typically involves the provision of consulting services and advice focused on the performance of the business as an entity. These consulting services typically cover things like strategic, technological, financial, marketing, and strategic issues. While as executive coaches, we often engage in discussions around business performance. Our role is not to advise, it's to facilitate learning. But even as we start to narrow down the definition of executive coaching to coaching that's undertaken in the context of organisational goals, there's still some considerable debate, even amongst coaching practitioners, over definitions of executive coaching or organisational coaching. Today, there's a range of terms used to refer to coaching that takes place in organisations. These include organisational coaching, workplace coaching, executive coaching, leadership coaching. We often hear the term performance coaching, skills coaching, and developmental coaching. Some coaching offerings also distinguish between coaching and onboarding coaching for newly appointed leaders in key positions. Relationship coaching is also a definition of coaching that I've heard raised a number of times. And here, the relationship coach helps maybe two or more people to form, change, or perhaps improve their interactions. There's also a branch of coaching referred to as remedial coaching for leaders who may be considered to be rainmakers within their particular industry or organisation, but who may have derailed in one or more critical areas. And of course, there's team coaching. While I'm going to touch on a couple of these areas in the coming weeks through this video series, the primary focus of this video series is on executive coaching. Now, to the coaching purists out there, I recognise that skills coaching, performance coaching, developmental coaching, and leadership coaching tend to be distinguished by the specific types of coaching goals and or particular areas of specialist coaching skill. But for the purpose of this video series, I'm going to use the term executive coaching as a catch-all label to cover all these areas of development. Let me say though, of the coaching focus areas I just mentioned, the area executive coaching probably focuses on the least is skills coaching, because executive coaching isn't so much interested in the acquisition or establishment of skills as it is in assisting the coachee to use their already established skills more effectively. Conversely, of the coaching focus areas I mentioned before, the areas executive coaching probably focuses on the most are leadership coaching and developmental coaching, which aim to change mindsets in order to help coachees overcome some of the limitations and blind spots of their current ways of making sense of the world. Another area executive coaching focuses on greatly is what I mentioned earlier, and that's performance coaching. Performance coaching typically involves setting specific performance goals and identifying pathways to achieving those goals. It may also involve the identification of current and potential cognitive, behavioural and environmental blocks to performance. Again, the coaching purists would argue that coaches engaged in performance coaching can be expected to have special knowledge and skills associated with goal setting, motivation and change management, but I tend to view these as fundamental coaching skills rather than specialist skills reserved for performance coaching scenarios. It gets confusing, doesn't it? So for me, the most relevant descriptor for the type of coaching I'm going to be discussing through this video series is executive coaching. But it's also okay to use the terms executive coaching, workplace coaching, organisational coaching, and even performance coaching interchangeably. Okay, so at its core, executive coaching involves an executive, his or her coach, and their organisation, given that the organisation typically pays the bill. All three are key stakeholders in the coaching process. The people receiving the coaching typically, not always, but typically include chief executives and other C-suite employees, as well as their direct reports. Increasingly, though, we're seeing executive coaching being offered across a range of positions in both public companies, larger privately held firms, and not-for-profit organisations as well. In the last five or 6 years, we've also been witnessing growth in what we refer to as private coaching clients. These are executives who are seeking executive coaching without getting their organisation to sponsor the cost of these services. These executives are quite happy to fund the cost of the coaching themselves. Now, despite this growth in the private coaching clients space, the most popular coaching format today is undoubtedly still the model that involves an executive, his or her coach, and their organisation as the sponsor of the program. So executive coaching, in our view, focuses on the needs and goals of both the executive and the sponsoring organisation. The goal of any executive coaching program is therefore to enhance the capability of the coachee and the coachee's ability to help the organisation achieve short and long-term goals. So a typical executive coaching assignment has three stakeholders: the person being coached, of course, that is the coachee, the coachee sponsoring organisation, usually in the guise of the coachee's boss or someone from HR or L&D, and of course the coach. Now, in most cases, I should say, the coaching dialogue is between the coachee and the coach. But there are occasions where organisations seek to have other stakeholders included in the coaching dialogue. While this can often help with goal alignment, in my experience, it also tends to limit the coachee's openness and their willingness to try new stuff out. So I personally prefer to restrict the coaching sessions to coach and coachee, and invite other stakeholders along to, say, feedback sessions, which occur typically after every fourth coaching meeting. The trade-off here is that by keeping other stakeholders at bay, the potential for goal misalignment actually increases. But that's something that I think coaches need to be vigilant about and take steps to mitigate as much as possible. In a future video, I'll be discussing one of the most challenging dilemmas in executive coaching, and that is how you meet the needs of the individual and the organisation when in fact they are in conflict. In the next video, I want to take a look at some specific definitions of executive coaching that might help us along our coaching journey. Thanks for watching this one, and I hope to see you at the next one.